Where did we leave off?
Bottom,
We're on
well, it's
page
the bottom of my
36.
36, it's the bottom of your 37.
Okay,
Right by the big note.
So actually, the top of your page 38. So you were,
we did all
I
this.
don't think we did the questions and answers on 37.
yeah, we got it right to there.
To where? Okay,
That's page 36.
dying. All right, that's the bottom.
His is page
Yep.
37.
Purple was obtained from the Murex shellfish.
Right.
Acts 16:14. Okay, we'll pick up there. The next page, page 38. Weaving.
Oh yeah, mine's page 37. His is
Mhm.
38.
Yeah, 38 for me. Weaving developed through the period of the
Old Testament.
Old Testament. What are the two types of looms used? A
Horizontal.
loom and an
Upright.
upright loom. That when we went to, let's see, was it Ghana? At the airport, they had a guy with a big loom about that long, about that tall. He was sitting there, and he was weaving cloth. It's, I would imagine, so that the passengers, you know, if they wanted some keepsake from Ghana, they could buy some of his cloth. But he was making it. He was really going to town there. So a horizontal loom and an upright loom, and then we got to watch as they were making Persian rugs. I see why it takes years to make a big rug.
Tedious.
Years. They had rugs in the museum that were as wide as this room is long and 2 stories tall, out of a palace.
Were those rugs or
In fact,
tapestries?
tapestries, but they're woven the same way.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of them was probably close to 3 stories tall. It had to been 25 foot tall, hanging on the wall. But the ladies were sitting there. You could barely see the thread. It was so small. I mean, it was thread. You could see it, but it was like you could barely see
They're
it.
tying knots in it.
And she's sitting there. She was doing the bottom one, puts it in, and they're tying thousands and millions of knots in that thing. That flies after her now. So
You're welcome to it.
I think it's a fruit fly,
I'm trying to.
probably off one of the
That's
plants.
because she's so sweet. That's sweet soup.
Yeah, the fruit fly is after sweet seed. Okay, so a horizontal loom and an upright loom. The shuttle was certainly in use by the time of Job reference.
7:6.
Job 7:6. The horizontal loom was in use by the time of the Judges reference.
16:13.
16:13.
Now the fly's back over here. I was preaching at some
Serves you right.
when I was pastoring. Yeah, when I was pastoring in Ogden, I was preaching one time,
Uh-oh.
and no one could see it but me.
Spider?
Right there, I mean, just right in front of me, so close that when I breathed, I'd say, and he's doing this, and so I just kept on preaching. And one of the times when I was doing this, I just grabbed him and wiped him off on the side of the pulpit and kept on preaching. No one knew. Not one person could see it. But it was right there in front of me. Okay, so anyway, for those online, we have a fruit fly in the room that's buzzing people. Okay, workers with stone.
Mason.
Oh, Mason.
Workers with stone. Masons were the partners of carpenters in building. During Paul's time, the custom was that the man who built the foundation also built the walls. This was probably the basis for what scripture reference?
Romans 15:20.
Romans 15:20. All right. In a good building,
Cornerstone.
cornerstones were placed at each corner. That actually gave me the idea that I used while I was building the porch while I'm building the porch over there. I thought, how am I going to make sure this thing's square? Because when you buy 2x4s, 8 foot long, they're not 8 foot long.
No.
Some of them are.
Yeah.
Some are straight too.
Yeah. And yeah. And so I thought, what lumber do I have that's square that I could use like a cornerstone? A sheet of, not pressboard, but chipboard.
Plywood.
Yeah, it's like plywood, but it's glued chip.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But they're exactly 4 by 8 feet. So I put that corner in first and lined everything else up with that sheet.
There you go.
And by the time I got to the other end of the 20 feet of a 24-foot porch, it was exactly 8 feet plus or minus maybe a quarter inch. So that's pretty close.
Build around your corners.
But I got the idea from the cornerstone. I used that corner sheet and then made it squared and made the frame squared, so it worked good. Working on the steps right now. Cornerstones were placed at each corner. They were necessary to give
Strength.
and direction to the building. Reference.
Psalm 118:20.
1822.
Psalm 118:22.
That's what I
Everybody,
got.
I got 20.
someone look up Psalm 118:22 for me, and someone look up Psalm 118:20.
Oh, I got Judges 20:20.
I got Psalms 1822.
Yours, Daniel.
We did something wrong.
Maybe you were thinking about this one up here.
118:20.
Oh, yeah, there you go, Daniel. Look, 16.
Okay.
It should be 22.
The
The stone which the builders refused has become the headstone of the corner.
Psalms 118.
So, Psalm 118:22. The walls were kept true by reed and
Plumb line.
plumb line. You know what a plumb line is?
Yes.
Looks like it's got a top. Hang it on a rope. Put it on the top. Hang it down. If your wall's not true, the plumb line will be hanging out like that. Or it'll bang against the wall. And then you'll know something's wrong. Plumb line.
Plumb line.
Using gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody seen the Tower of Pisa?
Now somebody give that boy a plumb line or a
Originally, it was straight.
yeah.
The problem was the ground under the foundation was not firm. Slowly, the ground was. Yeah. And they're straightening it because someday it'll topple over. So they're going to have to straighten it. I think they couldn't do it. I wondered when they started straightening the temple downtown here.
Who they what?
They're putting a new foundation under the temple.
Oh.
There's a hole you can't.
Oh
get
yeah,
there.
that's earthquake proofing.
Is that what they're doing?
Yeah.
That they're
They've done it in
down.
almost every building downtown.
Then they're down like 30 feet. There's like a 30-foot hole there.
Well, it's because all their tunnels and stuff they got underneath.
Yeah.
They're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know.
All the secret stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it was so they
It's
could.
not secret, it's sacred.
It was so they could escape in case of a lynching. They weren't the only ones. The pharaohs back in Egypt used to do the same thing. The Romans, everybody had escape tunnels. But anyway, Masons, we read that. So Psalm 118:22, we got that.
Yeah.
Walls were kept true by reed and plumb line. The reed was a straight cane about 20 feet long. Reference.
Ezekiel 40 verse 3.
All right, everybody agree on that one?
Yes.
Stone houses were not common. Most houses were built of
Mud
brick. Okay, that old movie, The 10 Commandments. That's the mud pits, and that's what they were doing. They were throwing straw in the mud and walking it into the mud.
And then put it in the forms and let it dry.
Yep, and they showed them slopping it in the forms and taking a flat piece and making it flat across the top, setting them down, letting them dry in the sun. Okay, workers with medicine. Jews were promised health if they obeyed God's laws. Reference.
Exodus 15:26.
All right. Note, here's another one of those notes. As I said before, I disagree with the text author in the area of medicine in the Bible. In this segment, he states that there was no call for doctors, and anyone who resorted to them came under criticism for going against the will of God. And he cites 2 Chronicles 16:12 as his reference text. Someone read that for me, please.
And Asa in the 39th year of his reign was diseased, in his feet until his disease was exceeding great. Yet in his disease he sought not to the Lord, but to the physicians.
Okay? So if one reads the reference without any preconceived notions of what he says, then it is obvious that Asa was not faulted for consulting the physicians, but for consulting them to the exclusion of the Lord. See the difference? He wasn't faulted because he went to the physicians. It's because he went to them instead of going to God.
Yeah.
Yes.
See?
Scripture
This-
clearly said that.
Okay? This can be easily seen if Jeremiah 17:5 is consulted as a cross-reference. Someone read Jeremiah 17:5.
Thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord.
Okay? So see, it's because of the departing from the Lord and depending on the flesh instead of the Lord. The Bible doesn't say we shouldn't go to the doctors. It says we should go to God first, and then God will give us a way to heal us. And if he decides to do it through a doctor, who am I to say, well, no, you can't do it that way, God. You got to do it direct. It's one thing about Luther. He wrote a lot of books, and one he wrote, I haven't read it yet. It's in my library, but I'm going to go through it. I kind of browsed a little bit. The title is Let God Be God. Don't try to tell God how to do his business. Let God be God. And if God decides he's going to heal you through a doctor, go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not letting God be God. If he wants to heal you direct, he'll heal you direct. So the Bible doesn't teach that they were cursed because they went to the doctor. They were cursed because they didn't go to God first. And if doctors were not allowed in the Bible, why did Luke
Yeah.
even be allowed to write a book of the New Testament when he was a physician?
Right.
So, Jeremiah 17:5, and I think you read that for me already.
Yes,
Thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart is departed from the Lord. Obviously, then, to trust in man to the exclusion of the Lord is what brings God's curse. Otherwise, to have an army as defense against enemies, work a job to support yourself and your family, or utilize any person, including yourself, as the tool through which God sometimes blesses you, would be to incur the curse of God. He said, I'll not suffer my children to, see, how do you put it? Lack bread? Yeah, something like that in the Psalm. He said, I'll not suffer my children to lack bread or something, but he expects us to work. He's not going to just shower food down from heaven to us. He did that in the Bible. And what happened then? They turned their back on him anyway and said, man, we're sick and tired of this light bread.
Give us
We want meat. He said, okay, I'm going to give you meat and it's going to be coming out your nostrils.
They had quail. 6 feet.
Quail. Yep.
Oh, my word.
And so, I mean, we work a job. Well, yeah, but God said he wouldn't, I'll not suffer to see my children begging bread or something like that. Well, okay, then I don't have to work. Well, wait a minute. If you work a job, who gave you the health to work the job? Who gave you the job?
Right.
Who gave your boss the ability to have a business for you to work at so God can supply your food through that work? In fact, if a man will not take care of his own, he's worse than an infidel. So
An unbeliever.
there's nothing wrong with going to the doctors, but make sure we don't do it to the exclusion of going to God. We are cautioned by God, to keep our eyes on the source and not the channel. See, the doctor is just the channel. And in the case of Asa turning to the physicians and not to God, in 2 Chronicles 16:12, the warning is not that we shouldn't use physicians, as the text author suggests, but rather to turn to the source first and keep our eyes on him. Then we can utilize the physicians as the channel if God chooses to heal through them. The author is correct in stating, here we go. The author is correct in stating that the correct procedure in illness was regarded to be prayer to God. Reference Numbers 21:7, 2 Kings 20, 2 Chronicles 6:28-30, Psalm 6,
107.
107, 17 to 21. Okay. However, after prayer, then it is completely permissible to seek help. In fact, every time I've visited people in the hospital or pray for people that are sick, the first thing I pray for is that God will show them the channel through which He wants to heal them. God, if you decide, when we pray over here, my prayer is always, God, if you decide to heal him directly, heal him directly. If you decide to heal him through the doctor, lead him to the one that you want him to use.
Yeah.
Not just one that you pick at random somewhere.
Right.
So he is correct in stating that the correct procedure in illness was regarded to be prayer to God. Okay? And there should be quotation marks after the word God. However, after prayer, then it is completely permissible to seek help from the physicians. Nothing in any of the references suggests that to seek help from the physicians second is wrong. Now, you better pray before you pick a doctor to begin with.
Yeah, yes.
In fact, new? How'd that new get? Numbers, I think that means.
Oh, yeah, numbers.
Numbers 21:7 does not involve sickness, but an attack from serpents sent from God. And in 2 Kings 20, we find that after prayer to God, verses 2 through 3, then a poultice was used on the boil that was killing Hezekiah. Thus, God was first and the medicine second, showing the proper order. Look to the source, God, and utilize the channel medicine. 2 Chronicles 6, 28 to 30 was discussed in an earlier note. To summarize, it is talking about prayer for the removal of a curse brought on by the sin of the people. Of course, in such a situation, the only acceptable course of action is turning to God for forgiveness of sin and the removal of his curse. So it was obvious that that sickness was brought on as a curse from God. Why would you go to a doctor to remove a curse? Unless it was a witch doctor. Then I guess, no, just kidding. That's okay. About 15, 20 years ago, the World Council of Churches met in South Africa and had a witch doctor open in prayer. They had a witch doctor open in prayer for the World Council of Churches. That's why we don't belong to the World Council of Churches. Okay? So, yeah, I couldn't believe it when I read that. And I checked it out. And
Which doctor was it?
witch doctor? Yeah. It was my friend, the witch doctor, who told me what to do. That's an old song. Coming out of old lips. Okay, so the acceptable course of action is turning to God for forgiveness of sin and removal of his curse. Psalm 6 is not necessarily even talking of vexation by sickness. In fact, by context, it is most likely that it is speaking of vexation by enemies and a prayer that God will deliver. Psalm 107, 17 to 21 is speaking of deliverance from hunger, thirst, captivity, and such afflictions. It is possible that physical sickness was part of their affliction, but only slightly possible. It's really deliverance from hunger, thirst, captivity, and such afflictions. The main thrust of the passage is given in verses 1 and 21, and that is the lack of thanksgiving to God by men for his goodness. Therefore, the reference given by the author is not referring to turning to physicians for healing instead of turning to God, nor is it even vaguely suggesting anything pro or con about seeking to physicians. Therefore, we must conclude that to say that seeking physicians was disapproved of is simply not borne out by the scriptures, and especially not by the scriptures cited by the text author as references. We can, however, conclude that to seek the physicians without first seeking to God is absolutely disapproved of in the scriptures. Give me a moment. I'm going to take us offline. I forgot we don't live stream this one because we couldn't put the text